Okay, so I'm going to talk about state of Node Core. There's a lot that's been going on in the project. There's been a tremendous amount of activity over the past few years, and I just want to kind of recap what's happened over the past year. Talk about what's been happening, what we've been working on, what might be coming later on. Now, this is the kind of talk that's really hard to do in a short period of time because there is a tremendous amount of stuff happening. We have a number of strategic initiatives. We have all kinds of different work groups that are happening. And it's gotten to the point where it's very difficult for even just one person to take a broad spectrum view of everything that's happened because there's so much it's easy to miss. So a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is a lot of stuff that I've seen, but I have I have no doubt that I'm missing quite a bit. Right? So if there's things that you're working on in core or you've seen that you're passionate about that you don't see here, that doesn't mean we're not working on it. It just means that I can't fit everything in on the talk. So far in 2018, we've and I have to up this number every single day. We've had over 4,000 pull requests. We're averaging about 90 a week. Right? Now we have the Code and Learn events. We had one just a couple of weeks ago in Vancouver where we had about, I think, 250, 300 pull requests in a single day. It kind of skews the numbers just a little bit. If you take that out, we're only right around 75 pull requests a week being opened on a regular basis. Now, if you look at the tracker right now, there's only about 250 open, which means we are continually reviewing and landing these pull requests. Only about 10% don't land. So it's a tremendous amount of activity that is happening. We've had, this number just went up, it went up I think by 15 this morning when I was looking at it, but these are the issues that have been opened within core over the past year, or just 2018. This number is actually, because of Code and Learn, also inaccurate now. We've had about 300 new contributors so far this year. Every change, and this is a testament to our build working group. Every change is tested on 55 different operating system and architecture combinations. So anytime we have any change, any pull request, it has to go over to CI. It's a Jenkins environment that runs on all these different systems. We have just right on 2,400 unit integration tests. So every single pull request that touches code gets run on these 55 different architecture combinations. And this happens probably about 5 or 6 times a day. This Jenkins environment is massive. The really fun thing about this is it's primarily made up of donated resources. So a lot of the servers that are there have actually been donated by individuals or by companies. The cluster of Raspberry Pis that we use are sitting in Rodvag's garage in Australia. He has a cluster there. We have Mac Minis that are being kind of distributed and we're working on. It's an amazing environment built entirely by volunteer effort. And that infrastructure is really what keeps Node running. We have about 95% JavaScript test coverage right now. And this fluctuates. Typically, whenever I land a big pull request, it goes down. Then I have to try to fix it with more tests. There's been an amazing effort here to get the JavaScript coverage improved. We're about 91% on the C, C++. We can definitely use help. There's quite a few code paths within that native layer within Node that currently aren't tested. So if if testing is your passion, we'd love some help getting this number up. I'd at least like to get it at the same level as the JavaScript stuff. We have a security working group, and this is a relatively new thing within Node. What the security working group is doing is not just looking at the security issues within Node Core, but the security issues within the ecosystem. So if you find a security vulnerability in some module on NPM, you can report that. There's a responsible disclosure process. You can report that to the project through the security working group, and that issue will be triaged, investigated, reported responsibly to the maintainers of that module. And Node itself can issue its own advisories, its own CVEs for security issues for the ecosystem and for core. So far in 2018, if I got, I was looking at the numbers, they're kind of hard to estimate, but we've got about 119 ecosystem advisories and about 7 advisories for Node that have been issued in 2018. All right, this work is going to continue. Now, a lot of this work is done, in concert with security researchers, and folks from Sneak and NPM with the the recent acquisition of Node Security Project and that kind of thing. We're all involved in this process. We're trying to figure out this process of how we're going to, triage, research, and share this information. So we have this going. Hugely valuable to the ecosystem, and hugely important for us to make sure that we're doing this correctly and responsibly. On the release front, it's been a busy year. We've had 8 Node 6 releases this year. We've had 8 Node 8 releases. Keep in mind, Node 6, it's currently LTS, that it reaches end of life in April 2019. Node 8 is going to be active LTS, which means we're actively backporting. It's going to move into maintenance in April. What you want to be on right now is Node 10.13, which was just released as the LTS branch, I think last week. All right. We've had 16 10x releases so far this year. And Node 11 went out just a couple of weeks ago, and 11.1 went out, I think, last week to fix some bugs. So if you're using 11, use 11.1, or your systems will crash. Or actually, they'll just hang forever. So that was a fun little timer bug. And then, like I said, 10.13 went out, codenamed Dubnium, on October 30th. 10.13 is the one you all should be targeting, here for any kind of production deployments. Yes, there's some cool stuff in 11, but in terms of going out in production, supporting things long term, be looking at it supporting 10.13. Now, the important thing to know with 10.13 is that its long-term support lifecycle is about 3 months shorter than typical because of it's tied to the OpenSSL LTS. So it's going to expire in, I think, the end of December 2020. Okay, so just for planning. Mark your calendars. Node 12 is going to be April 23rd, 2019. All right. Now we've had folks before wondering when are we going to are we going to have some planning? How can we know when these things are happening? What we started to do is just select the date when the previous major goes out, right? So when 11 went out, we decided, 23rd, right around that is when the next one's going to come. So be aware. This is the fun one. As I was going through the stats, what's been happening. This is the December major commits by node version since we launched the foundation. Something happened with 8 and 10. There was a tremendous amount of activity. Now, December major, these are the breaking changes, right? So, 4 and 5 and 6, 7, people were still relatively, hesitant to make breaking changes in Node. And then 8 happened, and we had this huge spike. And basically what that spike was catching up with a lot of technical debt. A lot of things that, people just weren't quite happy with, that nobody had been, kind of willing to touch or change or felt able to change previously because of a lot of the governance and management issues that that had plagued the project kind of midway through its life cycle. With 10, it was, we figured this process out. Let's just go out and and make a number of changes that we need to make. But we're seeing this, it's only the even numbers that go into LTS, and notice that the even numbers are the ones we're seeing the most aggressive changes with. On the odd number ones that are only going to be supported for a short period of time, people are actually taking their time and kind of doing things a little more conservatively leading into those releases. So it's kind of an interesting pattern. So we've had all this stuff going on. We've been working on all this, but what exactly have we been working on? HP2, it's a big one. It's fully supported now in Node 10 and 11. There's still some issues with Node 8. We haven't backported everything to Node 8 yet. Once we do, we'll be able to flip that bit and say it's supported in 8. But really the target you should be looking at is what's in 10 and 11. It's really simple. If if you've created a server in HP, a regular HP1 server, Yeah, we've intentionally designed the API to be as similar as possible. Start using it. Start, building stuff with it. It took us quite a while to get HTTP 1 correct in Node, right? Yeah, it took a number of years. It's going to take us a little while to make sure that this thing is really rock solid. But we need folks to actually go out, start building stuff, do interesting things, let us know what works, let us know what doesn't, let us know what needs to be faster. We're already working on making some things faster in here. We've added alt service and origin frames. These are just extensions to HTTP2 that allow you to do things like advertising quick support or advertising which domains a particular HTTP2 server can host. This is a fun one. We recently just landed Connect Protocol extension. This allows you to do WebSockets over HTTP2. We don't have the WebSocket support in core, but we can enable it, right? And there are some bugs, like if we're using the WebSocket stream and the WS modules from NPM, we can get close. There are some assumptions that those modules make that it's working directly with a socket. And when we're using HTTP2, that's not the case. So we have to address some of those mismatches. But this code works. You can actually stream multiple WebSocket connections over a single HTTP2 connection, and have that multiplexed with the regular HTTP traffic back and forth. So you no longer, once all the browsers support this, you will no longer have to have multiple TCP connections back to the backend server to support just bidirectional WebSockets, and you can do multiple WebSockets per page over a single connection, and still do your regular page traffic. I was doing some performance testing on this, and it's looking very, very nice. A little too early to put any numbers out because I don't want to make any promises yet. On the client side, it's pretty much the exact same thing. Current focus, making it faster. I'm already in this, conversations here. I love talking to Benedict from Google because every single time I talk to him, things get faster. So, we had another conversation, today that hopefully HTTP2 will be a lot faster now. Some other things that we're working on, though. Worker threads, and I don't want to talk about this too much because, Anna did amazing work on this. She's going to be talking about this tomorrow. But we now have multi-threads in Node, right? We can create a worker that has its own event loop and its own Node environment, right? So it is effectively a new realm within Node. You create this thing, give it some code. Let's see, give it some code like in this if statement. The top part is your main thread. That's what's happening in the else here. It might be a little difficult to see. That's running in a separate thread in its own event loop. And we're using message passing back and forth to communicate. There are some things that we're still trying to figure out with that, right? The API is somewhat similar to what's in the browser. There are some differences, necessarily so. And there's things that we just need to kind of figure out, like locking. Right, we have this web locks API that is being looked at as a possibility for doing shared and exclusive locks. This is designed in a way so that it does not deadlock your main thread, which is great. You want to have that event loop still being able to process things. I know that Anna's been talking about wanting to look at deadlock detection just in case. There are some things that we could still run into some issues, and we need to make sure that the diagnostic tools actually support this, right? And that we can actually see what's happening in these threads. A lot of the diagnostic tools have been built with the assumption that there's a single node thread, there's a single event loop, right? Let me see what's happening in this one loop. Well, now we have multiple, right? So what, how do we get that information? Trace events in there currently, you can get the information out, but a lot of the tools for analyzing the trace event stream don't notice there's another thread there. So I'm saying should graduate. I'm being optimistic. I really want this to graduate from experimental by April. We'll see if we're able to pull that off. NAPI is another big one we've been working on. It came out of experimental this year for, I think, all of the Node LTS release lines. If you are writing native add-ons, use an API, What it's going to give you is the ABI stability. Doesn't cover everything. If there's changes, for instance, in libuv and you're using libuv, there's no guarantees there. But it does provide that ABI stability for all of the V8 APIs and probably the overwhelming majority of the Node core stuff that you would be using. When I say the ABI stability, for those of you who aren't familiar, have you ever had to recompile your native add-ons when you install a new version of Node? With the ABI stability guarantee, you won't have to do that. You upgrade Node, that compiled version of the add-on will just keep working. All right. It is low-level code. There's going to be a workshop about this tomorrow afternoon. Yeah, I encourage folks to go take a look at that. It's fun. I love working in C and C++, so it's not for everybody, but I enjoy it. I actually like types. I'm probably working with the wrong programming language, but I like type systems. We're working with tracing and diagnostics. We're expanding support for trace events. Trace events right now is basically a JSON file that gets emitted with a whole bunch of data from V8 and Node. We're using it for async hooks. If you're enabling that, you can get this file out that tells you all the async resources that you're working with. The clinic doctor tool that NearForm built is built on the trace event file. We output this file when you do an analysis on all the content there. We're working on expanding the amount of data that's exported through there, and we're working on making it much more efficient. Right now, over the past year, there's been a number of issues. About a few months ago, about every other time you used trace events, it would segfault the process. We discovered yesterday that if your disk is almost full and you try to use it, it'll segfault. We're working on getting it more stable. It's still experimental right now. There is another project happening at Google called Perfetto, which is working to build a common trace event engine that would work on Chrome, V8, Android, and Node, and others. And what it provides is a protobuf, kind of a multi-channel protobuf stream for trace events. One of the efforts over the next year will be, hopefully in the next year, will be to integrate that into Node and replace the trace event stuff that's currently there. It'll give us a much more efficient way of getting this diagnostic information out. The goal is for trace events to be the primary way of getting diagnostic information out of Node, right? So right now there's a couple of different methods of getting this data. We want one single channel. We can enable tracing at runtime now. This is a new API. For example, if you're using the performance API, the performance hooks, and you enable this at runtime, you can get this log, and then you can load it up into Chrome. They have the trace event viewer. So this is fun that we added. But previously, you had to do this when with the command line argument. So now you can do this at runtime. Another thing that we can do is access the trace event stream through the inspector protocol. Now there are still some little usability issues with this, but instead of exporting to a JSON file, you can connect a inspector client. Right here, we're using the Chrome remote interface module on NPM. And you can connect to that remote process and enable tracing on a particular category, get that stream, and then do your analysis. The goal here is to make it possible to tap into the event stream on Node processes that are running within containers, right? Serverless, these kinds of things, where we can't necessarily get to that JSON file that is outputted on disk. Something else that happened this year, we're starting to work on diagnostic support tiers for diagnostic tools. Previously, whenever we would update Node, all the diagnostic tools would break. And we'd be like, okay, they're broken. Now we're saying we're actually going to support these things. And we're going to and it's going to be on a tier-based system. So tier 1 is that tool must always work, right? So we can't put a version of Node out without it always working, right? Tier 2 is it must always work for long-term support, right? So we cannot, any tier 2 tool, we cannot break it in a long-term support. It has to just keep working. Tier 3 is we will proactively test that it works in CI. But if it doesn't work, it's not blocking. Okay, we just need to be aware. And tier 4 things that they're not blocking. We're not doing much with it. Currently, so far, there's no tier 1 and 2 tools yet. There's some discussions about what could be there, but we're still working on it. With tier 3, we've taken a lot of the things that are performance analysis tools that are native to V8, and we're saying these things cannot break, right? These are the things that feed into, for example, flame graph tools, right? These are the things that export that bit of information necessary for those fundamental performance analysis tools to keep working. For a while there with Node 8, we completely broke these things. ES6 modules, we heard from Gil yesterday, they really are coming, we promise. It's taking a really long time to get this done, but we'll get there. There's a number of things that the working group is looking at, and the primary thing is really just how do we do this in a reasonable way with reasonable level of interop. If this is an area that you're passionate about, the working group has a lot of people, there's a lot of ideas, there's a lot of discussions that are happening. There really needs to be an effort to kind of gel and move this thing along, but it's going to take a little while. What else have we been doing? Pull the mic off entirely. I promised I wouldn't catch the wire, and I did. So making Node better for embedders, like Electron. Previously, if you look at Electron, the way it uses Node, yes, it embeds Node, but it has to hack the hell out of it in order to do it. Monkey patching stuff and kind of working around things within Node. We're trying to make it so that we have supported public APIs that embedders like Electron can use, so they don't have to hack into Node to get it to work. Right? We've added BigInt support, basically just working on better web platform support in general, making things much more consistent. For instance, if you use process HR time BigInt, you don't have to do any kind of calculation munging right now. Like the old API, FSStat, you can use BigInts there as well, optionally. Expanded promises support. There's FS promises and DNS promises now. So we're building promise support directly into the Node API. We're doing this slowly so we can make sure we're doing it correctly in a way that doesn't kill performance. So this will, we will roll more out probably over the next year, more APIs within core that are promises enabled. But you can use the DNS and file system stuff now. This one's fun, new crypto key generation API. You can now generate your key pairs within Node. Right? This was something that people have been asking for a while. It's a relatively simple thing, and it's glad that we actually have this now. Multiple resolves. Ruben Bridgewater is here at some point. He's been working quite a bit over the past year on improving promise usability, particularly around when things go wrong with promises. For instance, if you accidentally resolve a promise more than once, the second resolve, right, ends up getting swallowed. And typically these end up being from just coding errors. So if you have a switch statement, right, you forget to break, it ends up being a coding error that you just don't see. With multiple resolves, you can now see that, and then you can respond to that, and you can, for example, actually throw an error, log it, so you know that these logic errors are there. This is fun. Benjamin Coe added recursive makedir. Finally, there's been some issues about how do we know that this thing is actually there. There's been some debate about how the discoverability of this, but it works. And we're going to get some other new file system operations. It would be fantastic to have recursive remover sometime soon. But what else might be coming? There's work going on in a new REPL that's significantly better engineered. If you have an interest in that and want to see what's going on there, go take a look at that repo. There's a new low-level streams API being worked on. Jeremiah St. Phil Fishrock, it was like a little over a year ago at Interactive. He, Matteo, myself, Trevor Norris were sitting around a table and we're like, hey, this would be cool. And but what are we gonna call it? And Matteo just said, we'll call it Bob. So Bob is the new streams API for no reason other than, it has to have a name. So it's Bob. If you hear Bob, Bob is new streams. We can retroactively make it make sense later, but it's fun. What WG streams? We've talked about this. We had a PR a few months ago that wanted to add this, but there were some issues with it. The current proposal is that we would have a separate module, a WG module, supported by the Node project, similar to what we do with the readable streams module now. It's published on NPM, but officially supported by the project. That we would do that for readable stream, or for WebWG streams as well. So instead of baking it into core, we would do it as a separate module. Quick support. If you're not familiar with Quick, it's a new low-level protocol. Basically, some folks have been calling it kind of the new TCP. It's a UDP-based protocol that you can layer HTTP over Quick, and you have much faster bootstrap of the connection, right? And it's got TLS built in. It's got a number of things built in. It's significantly faster. I'm going to be starting an effort over probably January, February on what it would take to get Quick implemented directly into Node Core. So my goal is by this time next year to have a working prototype that folks can play around with. The challenge is that this is still being standardized. So we can't come up with something that is fully supported in Core until that standard is stable, and that could actually take a couple of years. Faster, more maintainable HP parser. This just came up last week. The HP parser in Core, it's if you've ever, it's probably one of the scariest looking pieces of code that I've ever seen in terms of this complexity of this parsing loop. It's not maintainable at all, and if you breathe on it wrong, you get a 20% performance loss. So you got to be very careful with what you're doing. So there's some work that Fedor has been doing on this. We have some interesting security conversations that are happening. Module loader integrity checks. How do you know that the code that you're loading is the code that you expected? So maybe putting some integrity checks. We're checking those hashes. When on require or import. Security policies is another one. Do you trust all the code, all the third-party code that you're loading? Do you want to give them access to your file system? These are things, they're controversial. They're very controversial. It's not clear at all whether any of this stuff will, whether this particular stuff will land, but it's being looked at, it's being worked on. And this is something we absolutely need requirements from users. We need folks coming and telling us whether this is actually something that is useful, or is it just more useful, for running Node in a container that you're sandboxing it from the environment, right? Does Node need to be a sandbox, or you get that from the environment? We need that feedback in order to be able to make progress in these discussions. As always, I love to end every talk with a, with this, come help us. I love having new contributors there. I love, getting folks started and seeing those contributions grow. We have the Code and Learn workshop this afternoon. I believe it's going to be in here. Ruben's going to be leading that. We'll take you through the steps of setting up your Node development environment all the way through opening your first pull request in Node, and then over the next couple of days, we land that. Your name's added to the author list. It's quite cool. So if you've never done that before, please join us. And one last thing, Node will be 10 years old next year, right? And this is so much fun. I want to make every NodeConf next year like a celebration of Node, of everything that we've done. So I want like next year, I really want to have like a birthday party for Node while we're here. But when you go to a NodeConf event anywhere in the world, be talking about this. We've had 10 years of this amazing platform, with all of its ups and downs and everything else. We've done a tremendous amount of good with this platform, and it really does need to be celebrated. So, thank you.